There is a supernatural world that surrounds us, and sometimes it manifests to people like you and me. You'll hear stories about the supernatural and so much more right here on Supernatural Confrontations. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the sound. This is a sort of a makeshift studio in Oklahoma. Obviously, the main studio is back in California. But I've jerry-rigged a microphone up here, so I think we're going to have much better audio quality. Thanks for your grace and mercy. And we'll be back in California on Monday, shooting in the studio with all the appropriate gear. But I think this will work, even though it's a little bit jerry-rigged. Thank you for your patience, and thanks for watching. Please subscribe below if you haven't done that already. So the title of this particular episode is From Oppression to Freedom. The man remains anonymous. Some people, and I get that, people have to work. And, you know, what's amazing is we have two lives. We have the persona, as it were, that we present to the public, and then we have who we really are. And oftentimes we keep that very close, those cards very close to the vest. So we'll hear that and so much more on the other side of the break. All right, folks, is investing in silver today a good idea? Colin Plume from our friends at Noble Gold thinks so. We had Colin on the show last month. And the reason why I did this, you know, they're a trusted sponsor, but I've invested my money with Noble Gold. A good portion of the cash that we had on hand, we converted into precious metals, and I'm not telling you to do anything that I'm not doing myself. Okay, so on the national desk, Colin explains there has been a huge sell-off of silver because of its low price right now. Silver is the most useful industrial metal out there, and demand is soaring for electronics and electronic cars, solar panel circuits, as the green agenda begins to speed up. As industries pick up after the pandemic supply chain issues, the trend down should reverse quickly and silver may rocket. Now that's, you know, he doesn't have a crystal ball, nor do I, but it certainly could go up. Folks, don't miss this. Give the team at Noble Gold a call and join thousands of others, including myself, who've taken advantage of this blip in the market. They'll guide you through the process and make it easy for you. And this month, you'll get a stunning free 3-ounce silver American Virtue coin with a qualified IRA of $20,000 or higher. Folks, you can't go wrong with Noble Gold, and that's why we've put our money in with Noble Gold. I believe it may be the safest place to put your cash right now. Call the team, 877-646-5347, 877-646-5347, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com, noblegoldinvestments.com. Folks, tell them L.A. Marzulli sent you. So this gentleman remains anonymous, and we hear this progression through his life. And finally, it gets to the point where he gets delivered. And it's an incredible testimony. It's a little long, but I think you'll find it interesting. Here it is. Folks, I'm here with a gentleman who will remain anonymous. We will call him Mr. Straight Line because I've got a straight line there where his face and his name would be. So, Mr. Straight Line, you had a UFO encounter, and I understand why you want to remain anonymous. Many people do. Tell us about it, please.
So I guess to start with, would probably start back when I was born. I was adopted at 3 days old into a very good Christian home and had a great childhood, a great upbringing. We live in the country. I was taught at home all the way until 7th grade. But when I was about 7 years old, between 7 and 8 years old, I had an encounter that totally changed my view of everything I considered to be reality. My whole memory starts standing, looking out the window in my bedroom. I I still remember the way the room was laid out, the bunk beds, the way they were in the room, that I would not have been facing the window. So through a lot of thought, I realized that there was no way a light shined in and woke me up. It wasn't a noise that woke me up. And my whole memory starts looking out the window at this object hovering just outside the window above our barn. And it was very not of this world. Um, at 7 years old, with the Christian upbringing that I had, I didn't know where to place it. And in the split second, it shot to the back of our meadow. It stopped, changed direction, and shot away a streak of light. So in my mind as a little kid, I thought the rapture had happened. In the Bible, it says something about, like a thief in the night and in the twinkling of an eye. And in my childhood brain, that's how I processed it. So I curled up in bed and I cried for at least a couple hours, and I prayed and prayed and didn't want to be left behind. And I finally got the courage to sneak out of my room and into my parents' room to see if they were still there. And I made it in there, and they were still sleeping. But in my mind, being a 7-year-old kid, I'd heard my parents use a bad word here or there, and I thought maybe they had repented of their sins, so they'd been left behind. So I returned to my bedroom, cried quite a bit more, prayed quite a bit more. And my grandmother lived with us until I was 15 years old, and she was the most godly woman I've ever known. And I knew that if she was still asleep in her bedroom downstairs, that it was not the rapture, it was something else. So I snuck down, and she was still in bed, and I curled up next to her and went to sleep. And I never spoke about it again for 4 or 5 years until public school. That was my first experience as a little kid. And, I spent weeks in church reading Revelations, trying to find answers. But nothing seemed to fit what I saw. And I guess that would have been the start of my odd life experiences.
So what happens after that?
So after that, I turned out to be a pretty bad kid. I was very rebellious after that. I got in a lot of trouble in my younger years, got into drugs pretty heavy for a stint in my life, and total rebellion. And I didn't want anything to do with Christianity or the Bible or church. And so then into my, I would say, throughout that time, I had some weird experiences. As far as I've always felt this knowing, I would say, in one of my first exposure to the high school library, where I went to school, I found books on Druidism and occultism and Nazism, and I've always had this draw to it that I could never explain. I love history, and I dive deep into history, but the pull towards that World War II era, the whole Nazi paradigm, I just felt drawn to it, and I could never explain why.
Mm-hmm.
Never had a good understanding as to why until recently. So then in my 20s, to be very honest and very blunt, I started growing a lot of marijuana out in the swamps, deep swamps, late at night. And I would go alone, deep into the woods, 2 miles from most houses. And I've always grown up in the woods and out in the country. So, coy dogs and bears and stuff, I've come used to not really worrying about them in the woods. So my cure for that, when I'd hear the coy dogs, is I'd pick up a big stick and I would bang on the trees before I'd walk into the deeper woods, hoping that it would scare them away. And at some point, something knocked back.
Yeah. I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah. And I really didn't have any idea about Bigfoot or anything like that. When I grew up, we only had 3 channels. 2 of them were French Canadian. So I never was really exposed to the worldly things. We didn't have cable. We didn't have internet. We didn't have any of that stuff. So I didn't know what it was. After a couple more experiences, I would say it was 2007 when I first got internet and a laptop. And I typed in there I was laid off for the winter and had some time, and I'd had 4 or 5 experiences with these wood knocks very close to me, very loud. You can feel them in your chest when they're close, that close. And I typed in the internet, what makes wood knocking sounds in the woods? And of course, all this Bigfoot information comes flooding in, and that kind of opened my world up into, things that are going on out there, and maybe an answer as to what I've experienced. I had quite a few of those experiences in a course of about 15 years. Sometimes people with me, 3 different people with me. A lot of times wood knocks coming from one side of the river being answered by wood knocks on the other side of the river. And one time it involved a vocalization. So that propelled me into a lot of research. I'm a very deep thinker, and I need better answers, it seems, all the time. So I've always dug deep. And it was about 2 years ago, I would say, me and my ex-wife had started to buy equipment to go out Bigfooting. And I've heard of the Sierra Sounds with, I think it's Ron Moorhead. Recording. And there's some other recordings that I'd heard. It's a guy up in Canada. I won't say his YouTube name on here, but it's speech and like speech patterns by these things that he's done a lot of research into. And that whole knowing thing I've talked about my whole life, it just seems, if I were to really think about something or be deep in thought about something, I would just have this sense of knowing whether it was truth or whether it wasn't what I was reading. So it's an odd. Anyway, so I heard one of his recordings, and in that very moment, I had that sense of knowing that I'd heard this before, that it was an ancient Twilight language, and I really felt like it was being spoken backwards. And through all my research into different things, it led me to believe, that it has nefarious reasons for being around people. But I still didn't quite understand why it had, exposed itself to me so many times, so many deep places, very far from people or roads, and I would hear it, but I would still feel safe. I never really felt like it was there to hurt me, maybe to watch me. So that kind of tapered off for a little bit. But then when me and my ex-wife first split up, I started to get into New Age when her and I were together a little bit. Had a lot of odd dreams my whole life, dreams that made me think that I was reliving a past life in my dreams, or reliving events that, so long way I could put it, I started to think, the New Age reincarnation, maybe I had past lives, and because the dreams would start and stop over and over again. Some of them a little more traumatic than others, I suppose. And so her and I split up, and I gave my life to Jesus. And shortly thereafter, I was traveling out of town for work, and that's when I started having these, what I call bad dreams, where I'd be fighting something off of me in my sleep, and it would paralyze my tongue. My tongue wouldn't work at all. I'd be trying to scream out for help, and tongue would be just totally paralyzed almost. The only way I can explain it is for me to stick my tongue out and hold it and try to scream out for help. And that's the sound that all I could get out. And this took place for about 3 years, probably from 2017 until, 2021, last winter. And my ex-wife witnessed me going through this many times. And the only thing that would get it to stop would be, it would take all my strength, all my energy, from the tips of my fingers to the tips of my toes to the tips of my hair, to scream out clearly, Jesus, help me. And in the second that I was able to say his name, it would stop. And that was pretty powerful to me. But then last winter, in my house up in the woods on the hill, my ex-wife was there with our 4 dogs. I took a nap in my chair, and I had another one of those bad dreams. Now I've never seen what was causing this before. I thought maybe it was reliving some PTSD from things from my childhood. I just didn't have an answer for why my tongue would shut off like that and not work in my sleep. And so during that nap, it happened again. My tongue was totally, it didn't work. And in that moment, the entity, it had a hold of my tongue, and it pulled me out of my body. And I know it's hard to say, especially to you, but it pulled me out of my body to where I could see what it was that had been tormenting me for 3+ years since I gave my life to Jesus. And I could see the 3-fingered, clawed, black hand around my tongue. And I could see the entity in the sense that it looks just like the cover of the book that Vicky Joe, that you had on your show, wrote about.
Right.
In that moment of being out, I knew where all my dogs were. I knew where my ex-wife was in the kitchen doing dishes, and it was the most terrifying thing I had ever experienced. And all I could think is, why aren't you helping me? Why aren't you doing anything, praying over me, anything? Because, for her, I probably looked like I was sleeping and mumbling, but for me, it was a total out-of-body experience. And once I cried out to Jesus, I slammed back into my body.
Right.
And it took me a few weeks to process that. And I've told her everything. She's experienced the Bigfoot wood knocks and the vocalizations with me. She's experienced some of my crazy life with me. And so after a month or so, I told her about my experience, and I just asked her, if you ever see me trying to fight that off again, please start praying over me, because something is definitely there, working on me. So I would say it was a couple months later. It would have been early winter 2022. I was taking another nap in my chair, which just happens to be in front of the door to my house that has a big glass window in it. And this time, a beam of light from a craft. There was a craft outside my house. Mm-hmm. And the reason I know that is the beam of light, blue light, shot through my window, and it pulled me out again. Now, the entity had tried for 3 years to pull me out, and it took until the last experience that it finally did. This craft had no problem pulling me out. It pulled me through the window of my door. I knew where all my dogs were in the house. I knew where my ex-wife was rocking in the chair at the time, and I could still see and draw this craft to this day. Looked nothing like the craft I saw when I was a child. The one I saw as a child made me really feel it was not of this world, but this one just seemed more nuts and bolts, and I don't know how else to describe it than that. But it was very powerful, that pull, and it was terrifying, absolutely terrifying, the most terrifying thing I have ever encountered. And it took all my strength once again to scream out for Jesus to help me. And as soon as I did, it let go, and I slammed back through the window into my body. And that also took me about a month to process and a month to talk about. So that really spurred on my research into why is this happening to me, and which led me to a lot of Russ Disdar's work, which I'd heard about Russ over the years and followed some of his work. And I believe it was a conference he was giving, Days of Noah Part 2. He talks about these entities that come and mess with you in your sleep, and eventually they're going to want to pull you out and take you with them to their realm. And after I heard that, I knew that he was talking about something that I had experienced.
Right.
So I knew Russ wrote one book and poured his heart out into that, and I knew he had just passed away a couple months prior to that as well, unfortunately. So I ordered his book, and once I got it, I put it away. I just had that sense of knowing that I wasn't supposed to read it yet. whatever was in there, I just knew I wasn't supposed to start reading it yet. And over the next couple months, I had some more encounters with what I would say maybe a succubus entity in my bedroom. And then I would wake up and my ex-wife would be sleeping next to me in bed, and I couldn't really understand why, because the bad dream I just had was so real that the only explanation was her or somebody else. So I had that experience a couple times, which was pretty terrifying. And it came to a point where even with all my dogs in my house and her sleeping next to me, I'd have to start sleeping with the lights on. Didn't feel safe in my own house for quite a while. And so it led me to a lot of more praying than I'd ever done, you know. And I said I asked Jesus into my heart back when her and I first split up in 2017, and I had, but it was I'd asked him into my heart, but I wasn't living a Christian life still. I'd still doing a lot of things that I shouldn't be doing. And so after all this happened, early spring, I started to pray a lot more and just ask God for his will in my life and not my own. And was having a lot of trouble with the relationship, trying to work things out with an ex-wife. And I prayed a lot about it and said, you know, God, if it's not of you, please take it from me. And 2 days later, she packed up and left. So I believe that was him saying, you know, this isn't for you. But once she left, that just left me and the dogs in the house, and I would no longer sleep upstairs in my bedroom anymore. For about a month and a half, I slept downstairs next to my dogs with a Bible on my chest. And my remedy was to play David Wilkerson sermons all night long, because I figured at least if he's saying the name of Jesus while I'm sleeping, maybe it'll keep these things at bay. And so it kind of hit a boiling point where I, through all the research that I had done, and I started to read Russ's book. And it's a big book, and it took me a little while, but it seemed to answer every question that I'd ever had in my life. And I feel that I know that God laid that on my heart to get the book, to not read it at that time, and he had the right timing for me for when I was supposed to. But at the same time, coming to the realizations of the fact that what his book is about, I'm sure you've probably read it.
Sure.
Well, to come to that realization that I am a product of some of the things he writes about was really a lot on me. So my whole life as a kid, you know, growing up, I'd come to the conclusion that as a child I was probably abducted, because I knew that the way it happened, it wasn't normal. I didn't wake up in bed. I didn't walk over to my window. My whole memory is burned in my heart and in my mind for life starts looking out the window. So I come to the conclusion that I was probably abducted as a child, for whatever, you know, some skin samples or whatever. I was okay with that. But the conclusion I came to that it was more likely for SRA, and that it has occultic, nefarious roots. That was pretty heavy for me. Almost caused me a breakdown trying to process all that mentally. But that's what I was shown. And then through some divine intervention, a close family relative of mine actually came over for a dinner one night. And the first three words out of his mouth when he walked in the door is, "How have you been? And you don't happen to know much about UFOs, Doug Riggs, and the Hitler Project, do you?" And I broke down crying. And I could hardly talk other than just say, "Yeah, I've been dealing with it every day." And so I met with that family member, him and his family, and we did a lot of prayer and a lot of, you know, deep talking. And the next week I took off from work and I spent most of the week hitting my knees, praying, Um, it was and very profound experiences since. More along the lines of divine supernatural things. He gave me a reason why I had to go through the things I had to go through. Why he allowed me to be pulled out of my body twice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's it's a lot. It's hard for me to say. It's easier for me to talk about the encounters with the supernatural that I've had in that context of the Bigfoots and the UFOs and the sleep paralysis, quote unquote.
Well, let me stop, Daniel. Let me stop you right there because I'm down to the 4 minute mark. What amazes me about this, and I understand that sometimes the Lord allows us to go through things that no one would sign up for. I mean, obviously you don't want to go through this. You're being terrified. What it does show us, and thank you for being bold and coming on the record. What it shows us is that there is a supernatural world, and that there are dark, nefarious entities in that world that have one goal, and that's to absolutely terrify us and kill us if they can. So what you went through, I mean, I don't wish that on anybody, but I think, like you said, the Lord showed you why, and I pray to God that you're out of it. I'm down to the 3 minute mark. I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
Well, that's about it, LA. I appreciate you giving me your time, and I really appreciate all that you do and giving people a chance to come out and tell stories as wild and crazy as mine. But people are really experiencing this stuff now, and I think they definitely need the platform to feel free to come on and talk about it. And I know it's been a huge relief for me, and I'm sure there's more like me with very similar stories. So,
And that's, I want to say this, you're not alone. I'll tell you that right now, you're not alone. You're not alone. And there are others out there, and I've talked to some of them. You're not alone. Thanks so much for watching Supernatural Confrontations. If you have had a supernatural confrontation, please shoot us an email, and our producer, John Adam Hicks, will get back to you. It's taking a while. We've got hundreds of people that want to get on the show, and that's a great thing. There's no other platform like this that I'm aware of where you can write in, we can screen it, and then set up a Zoom call with yours truly here, and we can have you right on the show. If you choose to remain anonymous, that's fine, just like this gentleman did here. You can remain anonymous. But a lot of people come on camera, and that's great too, whatever you want to do. The bottom line is some people are oppressed. Some people have had angelic encounters. Some people have had dreams and visions. As Christians, we believe in a supernatural world, and that's what's so incredible. And what I love about this man's story is finally he was delivered. And towards the end, he said, I spent a few days on my knees crying out to the Lord. And sometimes that's what it takes. Other times, Father just breaks right through and we're healed of something. So there's no set formula. He's creative. Father God is very creative. And it's tailor fit for each of us individually. He gives us just what we need when we need it. Folks, we will probably have hard copies of UFO number 3, Close Encounters, the film. It's a fantastic film, if I do say so myself. Spent a lot of time on it. The testimonies are riveting, and we've been showing you some of those. The testimonies are incredible. And I get it. People say, well, we've heard all this before. I'm going someplace with this. Number 4 is on abductions. And I think today we will roll out that footage, that trailer, so you can see where we're going with number 4. Look, you can save $5 by doing the pre-sale right now. Thank you so much for considering that. Invite your friends over. Get a couple of these things. Give them to your pastor. This is the coming great deception, in my opinion. It's not going away. I did a report right here on this channel a couple of days ago about a flap of UFOs over the Ukraine. I think we've gotten like 14,000 hits on it. It's very important. Watch that. Check that out. Folks, when they show up, everything changes. I've been sounding this clarion call literally for decades and continue to do so. My hand is on the plow. I'm faithful to it. But I need your support. We need your support here. And that's why if you order the DVD in the pre-sale, it helps us move things forward, specifically with number 4, which, by the way, will be released before Christmas. Anyway, folks, thanks so much for watching Supernatural Confrontations. Remember, if you've had a supernatural confrontation, please email us at supernatural@lamarzulli.net. Supernatural@lamarzulli.net. Here is the trailer for episode number 4, Abductions, and I think you'll find it chilling. Something very dark and disturbing is happening. It is a global phenomenon that knows no boundaries. It adheres to no cultural mores. And the ones who are engaged in this nefarious activity are beyond reproach. People are being taken against their will. In the cover of darkness, in the dead of night, they are subjected to bizarre examinations that are often sexual in nature. These people are terrified, violated, confused, and with no place to turn to, as who would believe them? This is their story.
No heartbeat. Ultrasound, no baby. DNC, no fetal tissue. There's nothing. It was clean. He's like, ma'am, are you sure you were pregnant? I'm like, this is my doctor. You can call her. I was pregnant. He's like, you didn't bleed all night. You don't have, nothing came. I'm like, no, nothing came out of me.
Thanks so much for watching. Remember, there is a supernatural world, and sometimes it manifests to people like you and me.